This is Business Weekend with Ross Greenwood.
Hi there and welcome to Business Weekend. I'm Ross Greenwood. It's great to have your company today. Coming up on the program, this week the Prime Minister committed $1.5 trillion of your superannuation funds to America as part of a deal to stay sweet with Donald Trump. Of course, the Prime Minister can't dictate where any super fund invests, but it does show the competition for capital is on right now. The New South Wales Treasurer Daniel Mookhey this week will pitch for his state to be a preferred destination for investment, and he's on the program today.
But when I think about who New South Wales competes with, I think about places like Japan, I think about places like South Korea, Singapore, Indonesia, India. Sydney and New South Wales leads Australia's connection with the world.
And the decision by Donald Trump for the very first time to impose sanctions on Russian oil companies is a step up in pressure on Vladimir Putin to end the war with Ukraine. But Donald Trump knows he can't let these sanctions last for long. Otherwise, it could refuel inflation in America.
Longer term, it's just not consistent to think that the US dollar will be able to remain as the favoured dominant reserve currency and at the same time be weaponized.
We also take you inside a weird and wacky world full of artificial intelligence at Oracle's AI World in Las Vegas.
In a way, it's a physical embodiment of AI that we then leverage to collect data that's then interpreted with AI as well.
On the subject of AI, this week the originator of generative artificial intelligence, OpenAI, was front and centre in Australia, pushing hard for government and business to move faster to take advantage of the rapidly changing technology.
If that mindset continues, this country will be really well positioned for this next economic age that we're really heading into.
Let's start the program. And late this week, US President Donald Trump imposed sanctions for the very first time on Russia's two big oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft. Until now, it imposed extra tariffs on countries such as India, which continue to buy Russian oil, but he hadn't imposed an outright ban until now. Quite clearly, this is an escalation of pressure on Vladimir Putin to seek peace with Ukraine.
This, of course, is an attempt to put pressure on Russia. But no self-respecting country and no self-respecting people ever decide anything under pressure. And of course, Russia has such privilege to feel and consider itself on this list of self-respecting countries and peoples.
But this move does something else. It puts focus straight back on the US dollar. For months, alternative assets, think gold, platinum, silver, even cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, have gone through the roof because they're alternatives to the American dollar. And countries like Russia, China, even India and Brazil have long sought alternatives to trading solely in US dollars. Trump recognises these oil sanctions could hurt the US dollar's standing, and this week expressed concern if they go on for too long.
They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. You know, it takes two to tango, as they say, and we're going to find out.
One of the world's leading independent economists is Paul Sheard, the former chief economist of Standard & Poor's. He was also the former chief economist with Lehman Brothers and with Nomura. He's the author of the Wall Street Journal's bestseller, The Power of Money. Now, often I catch up with him and speak with him from Japan, but today I found him on the east coast of America.
I don't think there's any major conventional currency, whether it's the euro, whether it's the yen, the renminbi, obviously, that is a challenge to the dollar, the US dollar, as the dominant reserve currency in the world. But looking at the trend of the last 3 years in particular, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the response that we've seen since then, that is the kind of geopolitical weaponization of the dollar, number of financial sanctions, but most notably, I think, the freezing of Russia's foreign exchange reserves in the US, but also in Europe. I think there is a sort of an alarm bell ringing around the world that, the exorbitant privilege of the dollar is one thing, but weaponizing the dollar for geopolitical purposes, when the US is not directly or technically at war with Russia, that this is a very dangerous trend. And I'm on the record going back as far as February 2022, when the first sanctions were put in place, that longer term, it's just not consistent to think that the US dollar will be able to remain as the favored dominant reserve currency and at the same time be weaponized. So I guess what we're seeing to a certain extent is that being reflected in investors and maybe countries, maybe reserve fund managers, trying to sort of put some of their money out of the dollar and into these alternative, safer forms of currency, the dollar, cryptocurrency. I'm not sure how safe that is, but it is an alternative store of value to the US dollar.
So the store of value is the key here, because if you were in Russia, if you were in a country that might have sanctions against it from the United States, your way of moving wealth around the world would be through alternatives to the US dollar. So that would be gold, that would be cryptocurrency, that might be platinum. All of these things have had massive increases in price and therefore demand in the last 12 months or so. But also, we know that some of the biggest buyers of gold in particular, are central banks. And so central bank buying of this is also one of the big drivers of the price. And it makes also, therefore, these types of assets very volatile, as we even saw late this week.
Indeed. And, the problem, I guess, is that, maybe this is where cryptocurrencies are a little bit more attractive, is that, of course, the dollar-based system is related to the rest of the global currencies. And there are sort of on and off ramps to the dollar system and the US dollar-based banking system. So, ultimately, it might be rather difficult to escape the long arm of financial sanctions. But, in the short run, you have countries like China and other countries that are looking at the situation, particularly with the freezing of foreign exchange reserves. I think that is the one, to me, that sounds the most alarm bells, because, foreign exchange reserves are reserves that central banks and governments have built up, assets that they own, but which, of course, by their nature are in foreign currencies, principally the US dollar. And if the US authorities, for sometimes maybe tenuous or indirect geopolitical reasons, say, well, we're going to seize those currencies. And what we're seeing in Europe at the moment is not just freezing, but also moving towards seizing them. And at the end of the day, that is certainly not something that is going to imbue the US dollar with a very much confidence as a longer term store of value.
Okay, so what does that then potentially do to the US economy itself, which has always thrived not just on the back of a very strong currency and therefore strong, sort of foreign reserves, but what does it do to its future outlook for interest rates, for its own sovereignty? All of these things must be affected if there is any sort of question about the future of the US dollar as that reserve currency.
Yeah, I think it's one way to look at this is, of course, the current account and the capital account are sort of two sides of the same coin. So in other words, the current account and mainly the trade account, that is countries trading with one another, has to be matched in the capital account. So there's a little bit of an adding up constraint here. So what I mean by that is that if countries are running surpluses with the US, ultimately they're accumulating claims on the US, which means US dollars. They might try to transfer them to other currencies, but you can't sort of have one without the other. So I think what we're also seeing, bigger picture, Ross, is a kind of sort of dualism or a sort of a parallelism between the growing fragmentation that we're seeing on the trade side. And of course, the aim of the Trump administration, whether it can be successful or not, yet to be seen, is to bring down those bilateral and overall deficits with the rest of the world. And that sort of is then reflected also in financial flows. So we could be looking at a world that becomes fragmented both on the trade side and then necessarily on the capital flow sides as well. But what it means for the US and what it means for the world is a less attractive world. Globalization has got a little bit of a bad rap, but prosperity does come from countries specializing in what they have as comparative advantage and engaging in trade and freer investment flows as well. So, this is throwing both on the trade side and on the capital flow side, the financial system side, sand into the wheels of the global economy.
Well, let's go to a country that you're often in, and that is Japan. Now, it's a country that has struggled to grow, but it's a country that certainly over the long term has benefited from free trade. It now has its first female Prime Minister, but the big question, I guess, is whether Sanai Takaichi can succeed where countless other Prime Ministers have failed to try and get the Japanese economy growing.
Well, I think she'll face an uphill battle, Ross, and definitely this week has been a historic moment for Japan to have its first female prime minister. But of course, that is happening against the backdrop of a much weaker political position that the ruling LDP party has. As you know, Sanai Takaichi now is the prime minister of a coalition that, even as a coalition, doesn't have a majority in the lower house or the upper house. So a very weak political situation. She is also taking on the mantle of Abenomics, if you like, and sort of trying to carry that flame forward. But there's a lot of confusion, I think, when I listen to the Japanese policy debate about this, because Abenomics really came in, if you remember, early 2013 for the next 8 years. And it was very much focused on getting Japan out of deflation with a very aggressive monetary policy and a more flexible fiscal policy, less driven by fiscal consolidation. But fast forward now, the problem in Japan is the cost of living and high prices. And so while one problem has been solved, another one has been introduced. And so the talk of Prime Minister Takaichi embracing Abenomics, well, if that is taken to mean very expansionary monetary policy, and bear in mind the Bank of Japan has exited from the old so-called QQE framework, quantitative and quantitative easing, and has now got the policy rate to 50 basis points. It's eyeing the next move up. But if we're looking at an economy where there is inflationary pressure above target inflation, and then we start to have more expansionary fiscal policy, that really will put more inflationary pressure into the economy. I think the piece of Abenomics that is sort of missing at the moment from these very early days of Prime Minister Takaichi is the focus on the so-called third arrow, that is structural reform, the growth strategy. And we're hearing the Prime Minister talk a lot about growth, but not very much about how that is actually going to come about. And really at this point in Japan's sort of situation, it needs to come from the supply side. It needs to come from structural reform. It needs to come from growth-enhancing deregulation measures, and maybe being willing to accept more foreign workers into the country. But the political tide has shifted there as well, and the pendulum is swinging back against the idea of embracing more foreign workers. That's actually a plank of the administration's policy. So, it's a little bit of a fragile situation at the moment. There doesn't seem to be a really coherent economic policy to getting real growth going, as opposed to pumping a little bit more stimulus into the system. Ross, the Japanese population has been so slowly shrinking for the last 15 years, from about 128 million maybe to 125 now. But the workforce, the labor force, because of the aging and the demography, has been shrinking much longer and much further. Perhaps the last 20 years or so. Now, when I listen to the policy debate in Japan, I don't see the politicians and the policymakers making that connection that you just made, that if you want growth, you're going to need to do something about the declining workforce at least. And, the silver bullet there is to have more foreign workers. And in fact, that's what Japan has been doing. Foreign workers in Japan now constitute about 3% of the workforce.
It is always great to chat to you, Paul Sheard. Give me a lesson in all sorts of parts of the economy in different parts of the world, and many thanks for your time today.
Pleasure, Ross. Thanks very much.
Now, the Prime Minister also had a big win this week with the US President by committing Australia to the production of rare earths to an $8.5 billion US defence pact, and by committing literally trillions of dollars in superannuation funds to America. And as a result, he gained accolades from Donald Trump.
It's great to be working with the people of Australia, because they also, it's a smaller country, but you have done a fantastic job in weaponry and the kind of things. So we do a lot of joint work together. Our militaries work very, very closely together. We've been really an amazing ally when you think of it, right?
Now, it needs to be said, some eyebrows were raised by the Prime Minister seeming to commit $1.5 trillion worth of Australian superannuation to America. In truth, as the funds do continue to grow here massively, it's almost inevitable.
We already have $500 million of just our superannuation funds invested here in Australia. It'll grow, it'll more than triple over the next period to over $1.5 trillion going forward as well. We will be the second largest source of funds, managed funds on the globe, only beaten by the United States by the end of this decade, given we only have 8% of the population that the United States has. That says something about how significant a resource this is, and we want to use it.
Now, just a bit of an explainer here for you. Right now, there is $4.3 trillion in our superannuation system, and it's going to grow. Each week, just by contributions alone, it grows by an extra $4 billion. If you added capital growth on average, it takes it up to around $10 billion in additional funds each and every week. Within 7 years, the total pool is likely to at least double again. And those super funds are independent of government. As the funds grow, it's almost inevitable that a big chunk of it will be invested overseas, and especially into America. This week, for example, in a repeat of the successful US tour earlier this year by superannuation leaders, major funds and investors descended on the UK, London and Birmingham to pitch for opportunities for this pool of capital. But here, we also need the right economic and investment settings in the competition to attract capital, to ensure more of those superannuation assets stay here in ideas and business in Australia. One person pushing hard for more of that investment is the New South Wales Treasurer Daniel Mookhey. This week, he'll host his own investment and superannuation summit, and I caught up with him late this week. Daniel Mookhey, it is great to chat to you. How competitive are you as an individual?
Well, I always want to do better. My mum raised me to always put your best foot forward, no matter what it is you're doing, and I try to do that as Treasurer, and I try to do that on behalf of the state of New South Wales. OK, so this state is in a serious competition right now, but that competition is for capital. Do you sense that as the Treasurer? Yep. Every time I'm talking to people who are ready to spend $1 billion somewhere in the country or in the region, they're always asking why do it here in New South Wales. And my answer is generally because we've got a pretty awesome state and a pretty awesome economy. Where else can you combine world-class workforce, incredibly deep capital markets, a thriving superannuation sector, world-class universities, combined with terrific lifestyles? So there's a lot to attract people to New South Wales, and there's a lot more we could be doing to keep New South Wales as a premier destination for people looking to invest. I can imagine the premiers of Queensland, of Victoria, of South Australia and Western Australia would say exactly the same thing though. Yeah, but they've been spending 100 years trying to imitate New South Wales, and we have been spending a lot of time getting ahead. The way I see it is we want every state to do well, but when I think about who New South Wales competes with, I think about places like Japan, I think about places like South Korea, Singapore, Indonesia, India. This is Sydney and New South Wales leads Australia's connection with the world, and we do so on behalf of the entire Commonwealth, not just our own state, but we also know that when New South Wales is going well, so is Australia. OK, but Australia, its economic growth right now is substandard. Yeah. We're growing 1.8%, long-term average run rate's about 3.3%, something of that nature. So for Australia to grow faster, it needs business to invest, not government. It needs business to actually make money. And as a result of that, that drives taxes, that drives the national economy. Agreed. And for the last 5 years, Australia has grown because the Commonwealth Government, the New South Wales Government and the other state governments have been prepared to use their balance sheets to put some growth in the economy. But that's not sustainable long term. You can see that in the creeping up of debt across all governments of all political persuasions in the last 5 years. So we do need the private sector to thrive. And you're right to say we have seen private sector investment fall to some historic lows. Here in New South Wales, it is one of our biggest challenges in terms of what the future of the economy looks like. But when I'm talking to businesses about what we can do in New South Wales, the thing they tell me the most is that pretty much everything in this state is going great except your planning system. It takes too long for people to get stuff done. And if you're looking to deploy capital, you have to often borrow it, you have to pay a rate of return to your shareholder. One of the things that we could absolutely eliminate is just the excessive holding costs while you're waiting for a bureaucracy to say yes or no to something. It's why since we've come into government under Premier Minns, we've made a real big deal to just get a lot of the red tape out of our system. I think New South Wales has for too long tripped up over its own red tape. I think we could simplify its decisions. I think we could be making them faster. And I'm really pleased, Ross, that as you and I are talking, we're on the verge of passing through Parliament the biggest shake-up to New South Wales planning laws in the last 50 years.
So give me a sense, if that works, what would you like that to achieve? If I'm turning up here with a business, I've got a block of land, I want to build something on that. If I'm a housing developer, I want to build on that. What's your own sense about how these planning changes would affect me tangibly?
If you want to build a house in New South Wales, what these changes will mean is you're much, much more likely to get a quick yes or a quick no. And equally, if you happen to be doing something like fixing a granny flat, expanding, putting up an additional story, you'll get an approval within 10 days. We're pretty confident that these reforms will catapult New South Wales from having the nation's worst planning system to amongst the very best. And we've learnt a lot of lessons about what's gone wrong with New South Wales planning. Too many people have been having to make too many decisions with no one really being held accountable for the central outcome, which is the people getting answers quickly. We're pretty confident that these new systems will be a big leap forward. But I think the second message that these reforms will send to those who are not from Australia, who are looking to invest in the other parts of the economy, that New South Wales is open for business, and on top of that, we're fixing things that are stopping them from having confidence to invest here. I've got to say, we don't struggle to attract investment interest. We struggle to convert the interest into outcomes in a way which is quick. And so from our perspective, we've got to build, we've got to build, we've got to build. And we want to make sure that people have confidence that they are getting access to a great workforce, they are getting access to quick decisions, and they're able to deploy capital at the rate of technological change.
Okay, so the other handbrake that I hear from business leaders who are investing in America in preference to Australia, and others who are in America looking at Australia, is energy prices. And unless you've got plentiful energy at the right price, we can see, say for example, metals fabrication in Australia, really on life support with government assistance. That's not sustainable either. Surely energy prices are one of the keys that as a state, as a treasurer, you've also got to address.
We do, and you're right to say our economy is becoming more power hungry. It's also becoming more thirsty for water, and these are two big challenges we have.
Well, that's data centres in the future.
Yeah,
but also we're talking about aluminium smelters, we're talking about steel refineries. All these sorts of things are struggling right now.
Yeah, and that is because we are trying to turn off one power system at the same time we're building another. And doing both simultaneously in parallel is absolutely providing challenges to businesses and to communities. But the truth is, here in New South Wales, we do need to replace our power system. All the coal-fired power fleet that we've been relying on since the 1970s is at the end of its life. We can have and we have had as a nation a hell of a lot of squabbles about what should replace it, but no one should contest the fact that they need to be replaced. We are pretty confident that the rollout is back on track. It's getting faster. We are building the new renewable powers, the transmission lines that we need to give business confidence.
Isn't it gas, though, that you really need? That gas pipelines, gas into this state is really, the big thing you need to actually shore up those renewable projects.
Yeah, gas has its role, absolutely, and particularly in firming the grid. And we've made no secret that we do want to make sure that, particularly in this transition stage, we can use fuel like gas to make sure that the power comes on when people need it.
But you talk about the speed of development when it comes to property development. What about the speed of development when it comes to energy development and trying to get that gas into your pipelines, into the grid?
Yeah, well, whether it's renewable power or other forms of power, we're taking a lot of the lessons that we learned out of housing and applying it to energy and the other form of economic investment that we want to attract. So when we did housing, we announced the Housing Delivery Authority. This whole job was to cut through the red tape. One of the things I was really pleased to do in my budget earlier this year was to announce the Equivalent Investment Delivery Authority, which is designed for those big nation-shaping, economic transformative projects, be it energy projects or be it data centres, to be able to get to quick yes, quick no, and to be able to work through the complex challenges that are presented when someone is trying to build a whole new industry from scratch. A lot of the questions that are being asked of our bureaucrats, our approval systems, have never really had to be answered because no one's had to think about how do you build these massive data centres in a way which benefits the people of New South Wales and not just the owners of them. How do you make sure that you can actually build a new, renewable, clean, green, cheap, reliable power system? It's been a long time since we've had to do it. So you're right to say that we have to get better at it. Our approach has just been to acknowledge, firstly, that there's a problem, secondly, to be pragmatic, and third point, to actually work with both business, with workers, as we solve this challenge collectively. And I think that's what's making New South Wales stand out from some of the other states and other jurisdictions that are having to have the same conversations as the nation is meeting these challenges.
Because the bottom line for any business looking at New South Wales, or say, for example, looking at North America or Canada or looking at Europe, is the return on equity.
Yeah.
That even goes to super funds, and you're trying to attract even the super funds capital. But we know that more of those super funds are directing money to the United States. And this week, the Prime Minister basically said that Australia will eventually invest $1.5 trillion in the United States, capital leaving Australia, going to America. You're trying to hold on to that capital here, but it comes back to that return on the investment, doesn't it, really, that somebody will get by investing here in New South Wales?
Yeah, absolutely. Capital will go where it's welcome and it will stay where it's reliable. And that drives me in my understanding of my responsibilities as Treasurer. But you're quite right to say that the world is noticing this immense national treasure that we have, which is our superannuation system, that a nation of 27 million people have managed to save $4.5 trillion in just a decade's time. We'll have about $12.5 trillion set aside that needs a home. We want a lot of that money invested here in New South Wales, of course we do, but we also want New South Wales to be the place in which we organise how we deploy this capital in the region and in America and across the world. Sydney is the nation's leading financial capital, but we can make it the region's leading financial capital too, because we've got this immense national asset that is our superannuation system. One of the things that I'm worried about is that a lot of super funds are telling me that it's easier for them to spend Australian retirement savings helping solve London's housing challenges over Sydney's. And they're telling me that it's easier to help them build a renewable power future for North America than it is here in
That must be alarming to you.
It is alarming to me, and it's part of the reasons why we've just pulled out all stops to just fix a lot of what's stopping them, and that is a lot of to do we've already discussed with our planning system. But I also just think this is a good thing, and this is something that we should be proud of. Australian retirees are being able to lead the world in meeting some of these big collective challenges, and my ambition is to see more of that activity take place here in Sydney. I'm really glad that we are partnering with Kevin Rudd. I think Kevin Rudd's done a great job telling this story to America, and what we'll be doing with Kevin this week in Sydney is to tell more of this story to Australia.
That's going to be quite an amazing thing to do that. Final thing is, what would you see over the next, say, 5 years as being a tangible, positive result for the campaign that you're now running?
Yeah, I want to see more people setting up businesses here in Sydney. I want to see more businesses looking to organise, headquarter and marshal their activity in the region from Sydney. I would love to see our financial industry, our tech industry and our university sector come together in a virtuous circle that creates more of the opportunity and the sources of our long-term growth. I'm of the view that the way in which Australia grows over the long time is through the power of its ideas. And those ideas come from our people, but when we're able to match our people with our savings, we're able to start to create the sources of future prosperity that our kids and our grandkids will live off.
Daniel Mookhey, good to chat to you.
Thanks, Ross.
Coming up after the break, we head to Las Vegas for driverless cars, AI-powered robots and Formula One. And we give you a taste of the rapid change of thinking that's coming for businesses of all shapes and sizes. Thanks for being with us here on Business Weekend. Well, the world is full of artificial intelligence right now, but as we've said so many times, the real boom isn't necessarily in the computer chips and the data centres, but in actual fact in the apps and programs that right now are still being developed. These will transform the way that people live and work in the future, from healthcare to transport to food production and preparation, to the way we invest and perhaps even the way we interact. So it's important we stay so close to these, building those new programs. Last week, Philip Stempian was a guest of Oracle at its AI World in Las Vegas, and he saw it all close up.
For almost 100 years, Americans have flocked to Las Vegas to live out their fantasies and chase a big win. In this world of neon, it's a place for people to suspend reality. Today, Vegas has changed. The gambling is making way for more events, concerts, sport, and massive conventions. In these giant conventions, people are chasing an even bigger prize, the profits that will come from artificial intelligence.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
Artificial intelligence has been a staple of science fiction for years, and as I wandered the halls of Oracle's AI World last week, I wondered what authors such as Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov would think of it. Because only 3 years ago, artificial intelligence was a fantasy, until OpenAI turned it into reality with ChatGPT. Now, AI is rapidly taking over business, government, and households. And it's not just the tech that's impressive, but the speed of implementation.
The models have made huge step functions over the course of the last 12, 18 months in the ability to reason correctly. What we're now starting to see is self-reflection, where the models not only are doing the reasoning, but they're looking at the thoughts that they've generated and the plans that they're orchestrating, and they're self-critiquing them.
Greg Pavlik leads Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. His team helps customers implement and adapt this new technology.
And we're seeing, immediate turnaround on key projects like 30, 35% efficiencies, and it's leading them to then make more and deeper investments to do more complex scenarios with AI.
Those more complex scenarios include more intuitive robots.
This robot is called Animal.
And why is it called that?
It's called Animal because it has 4 legs and it moves like an animal, and it can climb stairs and other rugged terrain and obstacles of all kinds.
Yeah, and how does it use AI?
Well, it uses AI primarily in the training process. We teach it to walk and to navigate its environment using AI in simulated environments and simulated terrain. And we use reinforcement learning, as it's called, to develop the algorithms that it uses to evaluate its surroundings and decide how to cross it safely. And so in a way, it's a physical embodiment of AI that we then leverage to collect data that's then interpreted with AI as well.
Paul Bingaman is a utility market manager with Anybotics, which developed Animal. You can't buy this robot. It's leased out for between $10,000 to $15,000 a month, depending on the customer's needs.
They'll certainly take workers out of harm's way so that they can work in safer, more pleasant places. And our robots perform mundane, repetitive tasks that people don't really care to do. And so in many cases, our robots free people up to do things that only people can do, like troubleshoot and repair equipment. And so we like the idea of leaving the boring tasks, as we call them, the dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks to the robots, and we free up the limited human resources to do things that only people can do.
Then there's this robot called Q, made by Broadpin, which helps visualize how AI can be used to achieve real results.
We are creating AI products with this robot, as we create a chatbot with Copilot, and it's integrated with Oracle. So you can ask to create a sales order. The robot can check for inventory also. He can approve purchase order.
It took Salvador Alcantara 8 months to build and program Q. He used AI to help him code it.
Robots, machines, and AI will help us to do better our job. Yeah.
The nature of the development work is going to change, but as people come in, instead of just sitting down and cutting code and writing out thousands of lines of code, you're going to be working almost like in a pair programming style with AI models.
The optimistic view is that AI will help workers do more, and therefore companies will become more productive.
The statistics are showing that from a productivity perspective, Australia is actually losing ground in comparison to what we see on the global stage. And if you look at a lot of the tools that are being launched, so especially things like AI agents in our applications, whether they be industry vertical applications or whether they be our horizontal applications, it's really giving customers the opportunity to improve their productivity.
Stephen Bovis is the Regional Managing Director for Oracle Australia. he works closely with Australian companies that have embraced AI.
We're starting to see a ramp in terms of the adoption of those agents, and as a result of that, the customers are starting to get some levels of productivity increase.
But there are grim warnings for companies that fail to adapt and adopt. Your competition might right now be getting a leg up.
Companies that are moving forward aggressively are really getting returns, significant improvements to how they run their business, new insights, able to build new products, do a better job by their customers, which is putting a lot of pressure on other businesses that have been less proactive to start to engage in significant ways with AI projects.
At the pinnacle of competitiveness is Formula One. In this sport, being left behind in speed or technology is not an option.
Formula One has always been at the cutthroat of technology and adaptation, and AI is obviously the next big thing. If we don't explore these new technologies, then we're just going to fall behind the rest.
Jack Harrington is the global partnership lead at Red Bull Racing. It uses AI in human resources, talent scouting, engine design, and even to interpret the rules during races.
We have an AI chatbot on the pit wall, which we worked with Oracle to build, which allows us to query regulations and make decisions on what we should do in a race live while the race is going on. Prior to that, we had to look through a big book and spend time leafing through pages. Now we can just type a question into the chatbot and it gives us an answer in a blink of an eye. So there's been some critical decisions that we made on that chatbot, and it's just really exciting to see where the sport is going with the introduction of AI.
But AI isn't just powering race cars, it's the brain behind driverless vehicles.
This is the world's first level 4 vehicle designed from the ground up for personal ownership. So basically, right now, if you look at the world for fully autonomous vehicles, they're primarily robo-taxis, which have been retrofitted, but this has been designed 100% by Tensor, specifically to have in your garage.
Yeah, so just tell me a bit more about the AI that this car uses.
Yeah, so it's actually our own proprietary AI. We've designed it everything in-house from A to Z.
Tensor recently partnered with rideshare company Lyft to turn robo-cars into robo-taxis.
Instead of the car depreciating, sitting on your driveway for 90% of the time, which traditionally is the case, you can plug it into the ride-hailing network, and it will go generate income for you actively while you're sleeping or when you don't need the car.
Just like this casino behind me, the next era of technology is under construction. AI isn't the final product. It's a tool like these cranes that will be used to build the next generation of technology and products. And like this casino, there's a potential for those products to make a lot of money.
After the break, we stick with artificial intelligence and we go to the very source. OpenAI's Chief Global Affairs Officer, Chris Lehane.
Andrew Clennell from Canberra to the White House.
It just couldn't have gone any better for Albanese.
Our political editor is always in the room where it happens.
Here's the exchange that's made the headlines.
Have you had any concerns with this administration or even things the ambassador said about you in the past?
I don't like you either, and it probably never will.
Let's go live to our political editor, Andrew Clennell.
Andrew Clennell. Stranger things have happened in politics.
Watch Sunday Agenda with Andrew Clennell.
Have a look at this. Apparently down the road sold for 1.5.
I wonder what we get.
We could move back to the city for that.
This is great. Is north facing good?
Which way is it facing? South facing.
Oh, look at those timber floors.
How many properties we seeing this weekend?
You, the city.
What?
I never thought I'd see the day.
Yeah, well, that was before the grandkids.
Keep moving with realestate.com.au.
When you're living in a world of allergies, it's time for Alateen. Allergy relief. All day, all night, all year. Alateen. Get tough on allergies. Available at your pharmacy.
That's a lot of baby gear. We've got one on the way too.
You must get the Booby-Doo 5000.
Sounds expensive.
Probably pick up an old Booby-Doo second-hand.
What doing? Working, Moose. I've got to pay for this Booby-Doo baby stuff.
ClearScore is a great place to find exclusive credit deals. For a limited time, get a gift card valued up to $1,000 on a personal loan with Now Finance. Don't miss out. Download the ClearScore app today.
We're in the Beetaloo Basin, one of the largest untapped gas resources in the world. We've recently carried out the largest fracture stimulation done in Australian history, which we're incredibly proud of. Australia needs gas and we are committed to delivering it.
A spotlight's powerful beam is designed to be seen from miles and miles away. And now that power can be put in the palm of your hand. This is the brand new Star Patrol Spotlight. Designed with rechargeable LED and laser technology, this light shines a beam that is insanely bright. It can project up to a half-mile away, visible from up high in the sky. Even from atop this skyscraper, it easily lights up buildings from across the skyline. That's over 30,000 candelas of crazy bright light. Pull the trigger again and it converts to a floodlight, turning this entire field from dark of night to super bright daylight. Spot it or flood it. It's your choice.
Wow, look how bright this is.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like this.
It's an advancement in technology combining focused laser beams with LED lights for intense directional light. Oh no, the power's out. Forget weak flashlights. Light up the whole house with one Star Patrol. Even compared to these two headlights, Star Patrol is up to 4 times as bright. And when you're on a camping trip, it's an essential tool you'll want to have with you every time. Even charge your phone with it. Got car problems? Well, the roadside emergency mode will help alert oncoming traffic. The built-in power bank has ultra-fast USB charging, so it's ready again with hours of battery life.
A spotlight, floodlight, emergency light and power bank could cost hundreds, but you won't pay even half that for Star Patrol. Call Global Shop Direct or go online now to get Star Patrol from this low price. And check out our 5 easy monthly payments. Star Patrol comes with a kickstand for hands-free light and even has a turbo boost button for a short brightness boost of up to 100%. But wait, if you want ultra bright light for even longer at night, then upgrade to the Star Patrol Platinum with 50% more battery life. Star Patrol is a spotlight, floodlight, emergency light and power bank all in one powerful portable device. And it comes with our 30-day money-back guarantee. Get Star Patrol or upgrade to the Star Patrol Platinum when you order from Global Shop Direct today.
Welcome back to Business Weekend. Well, OpenAI launched ChatGPT to the world less than 2 years ago. But since then, it's clearly revolutionised the way that information is used. OpenAI's valuation has soared in that very short time to $500 billion US, $500 billion. But OpenAI has opened the opportunity for all nations if they rapidly adopt the technology and deploy the necessary data centres, with cheap energy being the absolute key. Right now, OpenAI is engaging with government and business about that deployment and the opportunity that it brings. Chris Lehane is OpenAI's Chief Global Affairs Officer, and he was in Australia this week and spoke to Edward Boyd.
Australia is at this interesting moment in time where it can look to seize the opportunity of artificial intelligence, AI, because the country is really, really well positioned. And in seizing it, actually really help contribute to the country's gross domestic product, help generate economics for everyday people. And so a lot of our conversations here have been, how do we take the opportunity that exists? Australia has some natural resources, incredible talent. Already there are roughly half the country's adults are using ChatGPT that OpenAI creates and builds on a regular basis. There's 30,000 developers in this country building sort of the next generation of companies and products and services. And so Australia stands at this really interesting moment, and I think the government recognizes that. Even today we just released a report showing that AI could generate an additional 1% into the GDP on an annual basis, which by 2030 would be around $142 billion being injected into the economy. Do the math on that, that's roughly $5,000 per person here in Australia. So I think people do see the opportunity.
Yeah, have you come across many AI skeptics in your time here, and what have their concerns potentially been? Has it been due to AI potentially taking jobs, or has it been to Australia's copyright laws or something else?
I think the real focus and the conversations that I've had, and they again have been with government and business folks, but also some just regular everyday people, has been, can we really make sure that this technology is democratized? Is it really made accessible to everyday people here in Australia? I think people do understand and recognize that AI is a little bit like electricity. It is going to come. It's going to change how we work, how we live, how we play, how we communicate. And I think what people want to know is, are they going to actually be able to participate in the upsides of this? At the end of the day, this is what's called a general purpose technology, and that's a fancy way of saying it's a technology that drives productivity. And if you think about that historically, the wheel, the combustion engine, electricity, which I already referenced, the transistor, the internet, like those are all examples of general purpose technology. Those technologies increase the economic pie. And I think the big question people have, and rightfully so, and they should be pushing and asking about this, is, okay, if the economic pie is going to grow, are everyday people going to actually be able to participate in those new economics?
Yeah, you've got this report out which looks ahead to 2030 and the possibilities for AI in Australia. But what about right now? What's your sense of Australia's adoption of AI in 2025?
Yeah, I'll just share some of the data and information that we are seeing. Today, there are around 10 million Australians out of a country of 25 million who are using ChatGPT on a regular basis. Again, that's probably roughly half the adult population. We've seen growth over the last year at 2.5x, meaning it's grown 2.5 times over the last year. To put that a little bit in perspective, there are as many people, actually more, I think, using chat on a weekly basis than fill their car up with gas. And then there's 30,000 plus developers, again, the new businesses of the future who are building on this. And so if you look at where Australia sits globally, on a per capita basis, it's a top 10 country in the world in terms of leaning in, AI adoption, how society is really adapting to this. And so if you think that we're at the front end of this new age, this new economic era, Australia, because it is leaning into it, is really well positioned. And, the report that you mentioned, one of the things that we talked about in that report was that over the last 40 years, there's been about a 40,000 Australian dollar increase on an annual over time per person in productivity. About 80% of those gains have come from this country's embrace of technology and innovation. And so I think if that mindset continues, this country will be really well positioned for this next economic age that we're really heading into.
All right, what's Australia sort of lacking right now, or what's the potential roadmap we need to put in place to capitalise on artificial intelligence?
That's a great question, I think, and this has been a big part of what we've talked about today. And there are three, I think, key recommendations in the report, and I'll touch on them briefly. The first is broadly defined as AI literacy, basically making sure that you're upskilling, reskilling, training your workforce, building it into your education system so that people are really literate in the technology and able to apply it in their everyday lives, everyday workplace. The second is government modernization, government adoption. This technology is particularly capable in terms of helping to support government in everything from education to healthcare delivery. And so, what we're seeing around the world is that those governments who are embracing it and adopting are putting their countries in a really advantageous position from a competitive perspective. And then the third area is what's called infrastructure. In the same way you had to build out roads and bridges for the automobile or the grid for electricity, you need infrastructure for the AI age. And infrastructure is generally a mix of chips, data, energy, talent. Those go into something called data centers. Those data centers create compute. And Australia has a lot of those key elements in place. If it's able to stand up its own artificial intelligence compute, that will allow AI to exist here in Australia of, for, and by Australians. Of that $140 billion plus that could be generated by 2030, a chunk of that gets generated if you're able to actually really stand up this infrastructure here in Australia. It also puts the country in the position where it can then begin to export a bunch of the work and tools and services that developer community will be building and creating here in Australia. And so it really does have a multiplier effect. It helps stand up a local ecosystem that is sovereign AI for Australia, but also puts the country in the position to be an exporter of this to other parts of the world. And I think at the simplest, you need to think about this technology as nation building. It's absolutely critical for your economic competitiveness, critical for national security purposes. And if Australia is able to move forward, and this was a lot of the conversations we've had over the last couple of days, with creating its own AI infrastructure, it's going to put the country in a really, really, really strong position.
And just finally, one of the key issues you also call out in the report is improving public trust. I mean, how do you build that up when there are lots of AI-created, videos circulating the internet, or people are being potentially drawn into financial scams using AI? How do you improve trust?
I think part of building trust is showing people how this is going to impact them in their everyday lives. A nurse who's able to spend more time with the patient because he or she doesn't need to do as much administrative work. That teacher who can use AI as basically an assistant to help create customized education for different students. The individual who is out there and needing some coaching on something that they're looking to get into, a business maybe that they're looking to start. And I'll give you a really, really, really specific example that we just did this weekend. We announced, and this is the first of its kind anywhere in the world, but we announced a partnership with the National Rugby League. We were out in Parramatta with the Eels and announced a program where we're going to work with the league to make AI available for the tens of thousands of youth volunteers, the folks who work at the clubs, do the coaching, help support the youth programs. And the point behind that is that what the league has seen is that the volunteers want to spend more time actually teaching the kids and on the front lines than doing all the administrative work that often comes with that volunteerism. And so what we're going to do is create an entire program with them so that those volunteers are able to use our technology to lessen the administrative work so that they're able to do more of the volunteer activity that they got into it in the first place. And so I think a variety of things, but at the end of the day, you build trust by showing how this technology is going to improve the lives of individuals, how it's going to allow them to get real, tangible, concrete benefits from it. And again, that's a big part of the conversations that we've been having.
Chris Lehane, OpenAI Chief Global Affairs Officer, great to have you on the show.
So that's it for the program this Sunday. Up next, all the latest news right here on Sky News. Business Weekend returns next Sunday, but of course you can keep up to date with all the latest business news with our daily program. Business Now, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and also via our website, skynews.com.au. Thanks for your company today. I'm Ross Greenwood. We'll see you next week.